Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Savage Goose Show. I'm happy you joined us tonight. We're going to talk about some Savage Worlds combat and is it slow? We'll talk about that in a bit, but first, let's talk about the news. I'm going to jump into the newsletter today. I like doing the newsletter. It brings me a lot of excitement every week to see what's going on in the community, see what Pinnacle's doing, see who they're spotlighting. Because oftentimes I learn things that I just didn't know about Savage Worlds until it was time for these newsletters. So let's go ahead and share this tab here. So first thing off, I brought up the trailer for the Savage Saturday Cinemas because there's another one coming out called Thunder on the Mountain. This seems to be a more not modern. So the last one we did, it was modern day high schooler horror type of game. This one is going to be the second release. It's going to have everything you need to run the game. You have the game itself. You're going to have the characters that your pre-generated characters to run. Just a nice little one shot here. This is for Deadwood. So based on that, it makes you think it's probably going to be some sort of like Western-ish maybe game. So, looking forward to that. Savage Worlds has a lot of cowboys and Wild West, Weird West stuff going on between Deadlands. There's the Sixth Gun that did a Kickstarter a while back. There are other. So there was the Sidewise Recoiled game that just ended last week. Looking forward to getting those PDFs and getting that book. And so I'm just excited to see more of these one shots. I think there's a lot of good one shots out there for Savage Worlds, but I think there's a lot more that could be done just to kind of explore the different genres of Savage Worlds, and excited to see these ones being done by Pinnacle. If you're interested in the other one, the original one, that one was called, let me kind of see and pull it up here. They said it was a like high schoolers at truck stop horror type thing. It's called Final Rest Stop. That was the name of it. I'm not going to go into too many details of what was all in that game, but that was the name of it. It was Final Rest Stop, modern day. You play as high schoolers. Check it out. I'll put a link to it in the description, and I'll throw one in the chat right now so you can go ahead and take a look at it if you want. But look forward to this next one, Thunder on the Mountain. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that for sure. It says next week, so I'm not sure if that means what time next week, but hopefully we'll have more information soon on when that comes out, so we can grab it. If it's anything like last time, the price it is on release, for the first week of release, will be cheaper than the final release. The final release is like $10, but yeah, like I said, you can get cheaper if you grab it early. Next on Roll20, there is for GM's Day, a lot of stuff is going to be 40% off. You see Dawn the Die Kaiju. This is actually a product I think I own. If I don't, I've been wanting to buy it. Basically, where you get to play as kaiju, big monsters like Godzilla, Mothra, and they're like fighting each other. We're going to move in, and also you have Deadlands. You got 17 for the Weird West core rules. Again, this is all stuff for Roll20. This is not like the PDFs or anything like that. It's just stuff for Roll20 to be able to play these games in Roll20. You get the horror on Headstone Hill. I think that's just like a shorter adventure. Well, not short adventure, longer adventure, not quite campaign length. You have the core rules for Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. I'm currently playing in a Pathfinder for Savage Worlds game, which has been a lot of fun. We're kind of getting into the nitty gritty finally in book 1 of the Rise of the Rune Lords campaign adventure path. You have the Rifts for Savage Worlds Mega Bundle. I'm not sure it's all in that, but basically it's to let you play Rifts in Savage Worlds for Roll20. If you're not familiar with Rifts, basically it's a kitchen sink RPG. You can play pretty much anything you can imagine. That's pretty much the extent of my knowledge of it, though. You have the Adventure deck, which is the special deck. This is not the action deck where you have the playing cards. This is the Adventure deck, which has different abilities that you can use one time by playing the card. Has different rules to it that are not in the core rule book. You have to look at the rules in the Adventure cards. So you look into that. And then, of course, the core rule book for Savage Worlds core bundle. This one is what I'm tempted to get just because I would like to have access to those things in Roll20 for whenever I do eventually play games online. I imagine that day is going to be coming at some point where I get to play more. I play more games online instead of in person. Not that my in-person games are going to go away necessarily, but that I might have more opportunity to play online. So I might have to pick that up later. But check that out. A lot of other items, as you can see, 15 to 40% off. Yeah, go check that out. The Savage Universe stream, which happens on Thursdays, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because that's the day I am gaming, and so I never get to participate in those live streams because they're always on Thursday while I'm gaming my Savage Worlds games. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But nevertheless, if you are free, go over and join Star Anvil Studios with JM, who they talk about the Science Fiction Companion and the impact that it'll have on their Saints and Sinners game for their Kickstarter. Looking forward to that Kickstarter. I had the Jumpstart and I've enjoyed it. I'll leave a link to the Jumpstart in the description after the show. But they also have a lot of other really fun settings that they've done. I've read through the Accursed setting, and it is... I cannot wait for them to do it in Suede. I mean, they have a conversion doc out there to do Deluxe Edition to Adventure Edition. But I'd really like to just get the book fully adapted for Adventure Edition. It's kind of like how I like to have things these days. But the Accursed game is where instead of playing people hunting monsters, you are the monsters, but you are monster heroes. You are monsters fighting against the oppressive forces in the world. Again, I don't want to get into it to spoil it for anybody, but it is I read through it. I haven't been able to play it, but I read through it, and it seems like absolutely the kind of game I want to play with my players at some point. So check that out as well, and check out the live stream to hear about Star Anvil Studios. They have a lot of products that I've seen that look like a lot of fun, so go check them out. I'll also leave a link to their page on DriveThruRPG where you can see all the stuff they've made and released through DriveThruRPG. Moving on, then we have this announcement. I saw this in a few places. I saw it on Reddit, saw it on the Facebook group. The return of Savage Worlds for Solomon Kane. So if you don't know, so first off, you have Solomon Kane, which is a character from Robert E. Howard, who is also known for Conan the Barbarian. And basically, he's like best way to put it, he's like a Puritan, except that he also hunts vampires, something like that. I'm not too familiar with the IP, but I know that a lot of people are really excited about it. And in the past, there was a Solomon Kane for Savage Worlds RPG done by Pinnacle. They had the license to Solomon Kane and did one themselves. This one is not being done by Pinnacle, though. This one's being done by Monolith Games. They currently have the Conan IP license as well as the Solomon Kane license. And based on what we've seen, it seems that they're going to take what Pinnacle had done in the past, and it wasn't for Suede, it was for Deluxe Edition. They're going to take what they did in the past, adapt it for Adventure Edition, and then release it as their own book. It's going to be Suede compatible, and that's a Kickstarter. I think I put a link already in the description for this Kickstarter. It's not launched yet, but if you want to be notified upon launch, go ahead and check it out. So Hamster Doom says, but it sounds like they're going to have a book with the full rules in it. I did notice that. I don't want to confirm or deny that is what's happening, but based on some of the things I've read, it sounds like the book is going to have all the rules that you need. So you don't need the core rule book for Savage Worlds to play this version of the game. Kind of like how Pathfinder had their own core rule book. You didn't need the Savage Worlds core rule book. It wasn't like a setting book that you just needed the core rule books and the setting book. It's like, it looks like it's going to be its own book with all the rules. You don't need to go get the core rule book and then the setting book on top of it. Yeah, so that's kind of exciting just to see like more books come out for Savage Worlds, more IPs interested in Savage Worlds. I keep seeing all of these different IPs. I was even talking to a coworker today about how there's a G.I. Joe RPG and a Transformers RPG, and it just seems like every IP these days is doing some RPG, but it seems like it's just whoever's the highest bidder for the system gets to do it. It's nice to see that these are more IPs that are doing it officially in Savage Worlds. If you look out there, there's lots of fan-made art, content and setting books for Savage Worlds for different things. I've seen Borderlands. I've seen Fallout. I think I've seen Looney Tunes. There's a lot of stuff out there that you can do for Savage Worlds, and that has been done by fans and stuff. But it's nice to see official content like this. So once again, Solomon Kane for Savage Worlds. Look forward to that Kickstarter. If you want to go see some people from Pinnacle, here are some of the cons that they're going to be at. You have CoastCon, MythicCon, and Gamma Expo. Or rather, sorry, I apologize. These are not ones that are coming out. These are ones, some of them have already happened. But nevertheless, go to some conventions this year. That's something that I really want to do myself. There's a convention happening, I believe, in September, October, or November. One of the embers of the year. Here in Pittsburgh, specifically in Monroeville. Looking forward to going there. There are going to be some Savage Worlds games being played there. I am not running any, just because we're going to have another kid, and it's going to be a sleepless night. So I don't have the time for that quite yet. But I'm looking forward to going and seeing some. So go out there, find some conventions, and go to them. See what you can find and see what kind of games you can play. It doesn't have to be Savage Worlds. There are plenty of other games out there that you should try, and maybe get ideas for how you incorporate different things into your Savage Worlds games. All right, so from there, let's talk a little bit more about the different things that they're going on. Yeah, this little table here. And then here is the good old crowdfunding status report. Horror Companion and Pine Box Middle School has pretty much shipped completely. I got my Horror Companion about 3 weeks ago, I want to say. Legend Ghost Mountain, which I did not get, is preparing to ship. That's our Evil 3. Again, did not get it, but I do want to get the Suede the whole Suede box for that eventually. Awaiting shipment. 20th anniversary celebration. The Pledge Manager is closing, so go check that out. Make sure that you are up to date for that. I am getting that product, or I think I'm getting the Player's Guide. I don't think I'm getting the nice 20th anniversary cover version. That's my bad, I guess. Deadlands Night Train 25th anniversary. The digital files are available, but who knows when that's actually going to get into print to be sent out. Then obviously the Kickstarter for the Science Fiction Companion is live. So go check that out if you have not already, so you can get the Science Fiction Companion. Yeah. So let's go ahead and switch over to this little presentation here. So that's a newsletter. Again, Kickstarters. Right now, the only one going on right now is a Science Fiction Companion. And I think there is one for one I saw called Cocaine Owlbear. I didn't do a whole lot of research in that one, and I apologize for that. But it was in the newsletter, I think, last week. So if you can go check that one out on Kickstarter, you can do that as well. I'll leave a link to it in the description after the show. And then we have several Kickstarters coming, but they have not yet come, so I'm not going to list them quite yet. As far as just be ready for them. So main discussion. Oh, right, sorry. The Science Fiction Companion ends March 21st. Moving on from that. Is Savage Worlds slow, feeble, and boring? Is Savage Worlds combat actually that much faster? One of the things that we talk about in Savage Worlds is how fast the game is. And so real quick, sorry. Hamster Doom says, yes, Cocaine Owlbear is already written too, so you get the PDF really quickly after backing. Good to know. That is the nice thing part. I like seeing Kickstarters that are like that, where that's like pretty much immediately after they get their money, because there is a time period between the end of the Kickstarter and the time they get their money, and then once they get their money from Kickstarter, then they can start sending out product. And it's nice when you can get that pretty much immediately after that's all been done, because they've already written the book. Thanks for that, Hamster Doom. So yes, combat in Savage Worlds. I did a lot of talking around Reddit and Facebook and my community tab, talking about Savage Worlds combat recently, and this has been a conversation I've had several times in the past year, 2 years, 3 years. And the question is Savage Worlds combat actually faster? We talk about Savage Worlds being fast, furious, fun, but is it actually fast? And there's two things that can go along with that. One, you could say, well, it's not about being fast, furious, and fun all at once. Maybe it doesn't have to be all three at once. Maybe it's fast now, it's furious later, and then it's also fun later. Or right now it's furious, but other parts of it are fast. Other parts are the more fun parts. But also, I do think, personally, that Savage Worlds combat is quite fast. Maybe it's just my experience. Maybe experiences change between people. And we're going to talk about that as well. So let's go ahead and kind of get into it. So first off, what does it mean to be slow? What does it mean to be slow? What does it mean for combat to be slow? And I think when we talk about being slow, we often are comparing the game to other systems we've played, other systems that we're familiar with. And the one system that kind of comes to mind, I was supposed to do one at a time. Oh well, fifth edition. That's the kid on the block right now, right? Everybody knows fifth edition. That's kind of where we're at. It is the number one game sold in the world. And when you look at D&D, a lot of the game revolves around combat. Now you can say that's true for a lot of tabletop role-playing games. Is that a lot of them kind of were born out of war games of some sort, tabletop war games, and so a lot of them have a lot of focus on combat, and that's often a lot of parts that people really enjoy in their game is the combat. Now, I personally enjoy way more than just the combat. I enjoy the role-playing part. There's the exploration part. All the pillars of tabletop role-playing games. But we can't just compare it to D&D 5th edition. Now, if you put it in the context, Savage Worlds in the context of the games that were out when it came out, we're talking about D&D 3, 3.5, and Pathfinder, which, in my opinion, were even slower in combat than 5th edition. 5th edition was meant to be a lot more quick to do things. They added in the more bounded accuracy, slower power creep at levels, and kind of making things a little bit simpler sometimes with just giving disadvantage versus an advantage instead of having to worry about all these numbers. And yet I still think that 5th edition is still, personally, in my opinion, still slower than Savage Worlds combat, in my experience. Now, it may not be as quick as maybe some other systems. Someone mentioned that they think that's slower than OSR games, which is not. I don't have much experience to speak to OSR games, but they say, for them, OSR games are a lot more quick than Savage Worlds, or maybe as quick. Call of Cthulhu combat tends to be a little bit quicker just because it's a little more deadly for the players. Although even in my experience then, it was still, I think, maybe about the same speed as Savage Worlds, maybe a little bit. It really depends on the situation, I think. And there's other games where it's a lot quicker both ways. Listening to a few people talk about the new Crown and Skull TTRPG, where every roll that is done by the players, so the GM just doesn't do any rolls whatsoever, which I think is super interesting. And people find that works. It seems like that sounds like it worked pretty fast because it kept the players engaged. And that's the thing we're going to get into talking about is engagement. But we're going to move on to our next slide. And what makes Savage Worlds combat slow? So let's acknowledge, maybe it is a little bit slow, or maybe there are things that are about Savage Worlds that are slow. What are those things? What are the things that makes Savage Worlds too slow? Well, first, people talk about the initiative system. Excuse me. And I realized that I got this nice whiskey out earlier, and I forgot to actually pour me some to sip on during this live stream. So the initiative system. In other games like Dungeons and Dragons and a few other ones, you roll initiative at the beginning, or you establish initiative at the beginning, and that is the initiative for the rest of the combat. Now, that's not true of all of them, but we're going to talk about, generally speaking, some of the bigger games, Pathfinder and D&D. That's the way the system works. You rolled initiative, you establish initiative at the beginning of combat. That's the initiative for the rest of the game. And you do that once. Now, some people will say that, in my opinion, is that first initial rolling for initiative can be a little bit long because everyone has to roll. They have to figure out what their bonuses are to that. Then you have, as the GM, have to kind of record that down, write down. But one of the advantages there is that it is a one-time thing, right? You set the initiative, and then that is the initiative for the rest of the game. People know when their turn is. They know when they need to be ready by, and you don't have to kind of deal out cards like we do in Savage Worlds every round. What else? Exploding and acing dice. You're not just rolling. If you do get the highest result on a die and it explodes, and you have to keep re-rolling, you have to do some math, and you're rolling multiple times. That does add a little bit of time. I don't really have much else to say about that. It does add a little more time to kind of do that. Damage calculations. We're not doing like in D&D and some other systems where we are using hit points. We're not just, okay, roll damage, do that much damage to the thing. That's it. Because of the way Savage Worlds works with being shaken statuses and wounds, using raises and everything, there is an element in which we have to calculate what the result is. Either the player has to, if they know the toughness score of what they're trying to hit, or the GM has to do that really quickly. Now, there's some ways that you can get around that, but again, we'll talk about that in a moment. But damage calculation, because it's so much different than the simple hit point deduction system, can be a little bit more challenging or time consuming, or maybe result in more work for trying to just paper upkeeping situations for the GM. Conditions. Now, this is a true for 100% in D&D as well, and in Pathfinder and other systems as well, and that's having a bunch of conditions. Savage Worlds has quite a few as well. We have Bound, Entangled, all the other ones, Stunned. You have Darkness modifiers. You have Cover modifiers. There's a lot of conditions and modifiers that you can apply to a single target. And so what often happens when I'm doing our combat is we'll list out like everything that's affecting the player, and then we have to try to do the math to figure out the total bonuses before they roll. And doing it before rolling definitely makes it a little bit easier than waiting until after rolling to figure out all their bonuses and everything, because then they know exactly what they need to roll essentially to get their target number. But trying to do all that math and stuff and trying to keep track of all those conditions can be complicated, and it can cause some slowdown in combat. I know often we'll forget about a certain thing afterwards. Now, luckily, we don't tend to take that. We aren't too worried about that. We don't try to, go back and try to fix it based on something, but we do often forget about certain conditions and stuff. And there are ways, again, that we can try to keep track of that better. But nevertheless, conditions are a thing that can cause combat to slow down. Too many decisions. One of the nice things about Savage Worlds is that there's a lot of options for players to use inside combat. It's not just, okay, I attack with my sword. Okay, I attack with my bow and arrow. Okay, I cast a power or activate a power. You have other options as well. You can test. You can wild attack. You can desperate attack. You can do a called shot. And there's a whole entire list of things that you can do inside combat that isn't just swinging your sword or just saying, okay, I roll fighting. Okay, I got a 5. Does that hit? Okay, no. Okay, moving on. There's a lot more options, and while those options are nice, they can also cause analysis paralysis and cause players to not really know for sure what they want to do in that situation, what they want to do in this combat situation. And then the last thing is grand combat plans, and this is much more of a GM thing. What I mean by this is often GMs have this idea of having this like grand, great combat where they will have the big bad evil guy fighting off against the players. There's a bunch of minions, and and I apologize. They have all these thoughts and things that they want to do, and then all these, maybe there's like several wild cards in the combat, and then, so the GM also has a whole bunch of bennies to use as well, and that can really slow down and bog down combat because you're going through, and it just can make a really long combat. Now, some people like that kind of combat, right? Some people like having a nice, long, drawn-out final combat, but these long-out, drawn-out combats can kind of slow down the game and feel like it's getting a little stagnant if you're trying to do the same thing over and over again. Now, again, it's going to be based on your group, your players, and how things go, but that's one way that combat can be slowed down. Now, in my opinion, while some of these are definitely valid, these are valid things that can slow down combat. Just because it's maybe a little bit slower than, or just because they can slow down combat doesn't mean that they're slow. For one, I don't think that initiative dealing out the cards each time is actually that slow because it goes really quickly, and because you're just dealing things out, and it doesn't take that much time. It takes maybe 4 seconds to do that. On top of that, though, I do think that the initiative system is more furious and more fun. Players are engaged because they're looking forward to seeing what they're getting every single time, and to see if their enemies are going to get a higher card or a lower card, and to see what their allies are doing, and to see if they're going to get a Joker. Because that Joker gives them the extra Benny, gives them the +2 to damage, +2 to all their trait rolls and such. And so it's really exciting, and I think that makes the initiative system more furious. I also really like, as a player and as a GM, that initiative isn't stagnant every single turn, because players don't know when they're going to be coming up next round. They're not just waiting for till oh, I know I'm after him, so I'm just going to sit here on my phone until that player is done. Now I'll say I'm not going to let. I don't like players on their phones on my table. I will definitely say something if I notice. So don't do that, people. Don't be on your phones during your games. But point being is that this initiative system using cards does keep people on their feet a little bit more. And that furious part of the initiative system is also why I think, while exploding dice might be a little bit slower than having to roll more other, than just doing one roll. One, we're not the only system that has exploding dice. But two, I think that kind of system for exploding dice is a lot of fun. It's really engaging. It's super exciting when players are huddling around the table and someone rolls their dice and they get sixes on both their D6s, and things just keep popping off, and things get really exciting and people are really engaged. While it may technically slow the game down to do the calculations, to reroll dice, people are engaged and things will not feel slow because they're engaged and they're excited about what's going on in combat. Now, the damage calculations, there is something to that. And that's why I recommend, and something I've done recently, is I actually have a table. You can get some bookmarks from Pinnacle that have these damage calculators. If you go on savage.us, they also have a damage calculator to tell you how many wounds based on how much toughness and everything, if they're shaking or whatever. And I have that printed out with my player characters' names written next to the different values for parry and for toughness, so that I can quickly go, okay, roll damage. Okay, that's a 20. I don't say it out loud. I say, hey, you have 2 wounds, and let them decide from there if they want to bending. That's one of those decisions that we're going to talk about later. Conditions. This one is hard to kind of respond to because it's an accurate statement, and I think that's one of the things that in any game you have to just acknowledge and accept. Either you're going to have conditions that are going to apply penalties in some way. Maybe it's just disadvantage, or maybe it's just some minor penalty. But in some way, we need to have the conditions to have a good combat system, in my opinion. Things that if you don't have a way to do this, that's easy and quick and intuitive, things are going to break down. Now, there might be some easier ways that we could do this. And one of the things that Savage Worlds does encourage is for you to make quick judgment calls and not get bogged down in the rules. We want you to play the game and have fun with it. So if you forget about condition, not a big deal. Not a big deal. But it's nice that they are there if you're trying to go for that gritty, realistic combat. And the flexibility of the system is one of the things I love about Savage Worlds. Now, too-many decisions. This is one of those things where, again, this is absolutely correct. There's a lot of decisions to be had. And yet, in my experience and my suggestion to most people is that instead of encouraging your players to think about the combat mechanically, is to think about the combat narratively. And this goes for the GM too. When someone describes their actions more narratively rather than mechanically, try to be more lenient on maybe the rules. Maybe they're 7 inches away and they have a pace of 6, but they describe running towards something and stabbing their spear through them or whatever, and just letting that kind of roll out more easily can be a lot more fun. Also, for players who are not combat focused, so their characters are not combat focused, it can be a lot more fun to describe things narratively, and then you as the GM to tell them what that's going to accomplish and how you're going to allow them to accomplish it. Maybe say, hey, I'm going to yell at them and to try to distract them. Okay, cool. We're going to use taunt for that. Okay, cool. We're going to test them in some way. It's something that you're doing to try to convince them to be distracted in some way or be vulnerable in some way. Or if you get really lucky, you can shake them in some way. And that's one of the beauties about Savage Worlds, I think, and other combat systems, that we have all these options to allow things to kind of push ourselves forward to giving us more narrative options on top of the more mechanical options. And then for grand combat plans, this is going to be on a GM by GM basis. You need to decide what your GM by GM basis and your group by group basis, and deciding what do players actually want to do. They actually want to have a big, long, drawn out fight against the big bad. Do they want to have the possibility of their characters dying? All that kind of stuff. So, and now I do think that GMs need to be careful about their use of bennies. One thing I do when I do use bennies, though, is I try to announce the use of my bennies. Like, oh, I'm spending a benny, and I try to announce like how many bennies I have left, because it for at least for my players, the fact that they've forced me to use bennies for them is an achievement at some level, and that kind of gets to what I'm going to get at here. What is actually slowing down Savage Worlds? What makes Savage Worlds combat slow, if ever? The first thing is failure. When players feel like they've failed, often that's what it makes them disengaged. We don't want to be associated with negativity. Now we have to accept that in games like in any tabletop role playing game, there's a possibility of failure, and sometimes we need to actually like be really excited about failure. There's ways and times that we can be excited about failure, and the way that like critical failures, for example, are actually kind of exciting way to see failure. So like, oh no, how are we going to deal with this new situation that has been put before us? But overall, I think that failure in combat, especially just a generic failure, a swing and a miss, or even worse, sometimes I swing and I hit, but I didn't do enough damage to actually hurt them, can make people feel a little disengaged from that. So I think that now, luckily, I think in Savage Worlds, for the most part, there's less opportunity for failure. I think that one situation there can be a little bit more of that, just because people can hit and then miss and basically not do anything. But overall, I think that Savage Worlds does allow us to allow our players and to succeed more often. I think the way that the game is designed, it allows the players to succeed more often. Now, on top of failure, which is just part of the game and part of life, sometimes we fail, and that's just going to be something we have to accept. I will say to GMs, we have to make sure that we're not being too harsh on our players to cause them to be failing all the time. Remember, they are part of the story as well. I'm not saying you should let them win all the time or let them succeed all the time, but also don't put them in situations necessarily that is going to cause them to constantly fail over and over and over again. And that's not just a Savage Worlds tip. That is a TTRPG tip. Don't put your players in situations where they're just going to keep failing and failing and failing. That's not going to be fun for them, and it's not going to be fun for you. But lastly, what is actually slowing down? I think some of you have already hit this in the chat. It's players. Players, they slow down combat. Comes to their turn, they don't know what to do. And this is not just players, to be clear. When I say players, I don't mean just the players playing the game and not the dungeon master or the game master. It's the game master too. We have to put some of the blame on us. Sometimes we don't know how things work. Sometimes we haven't prepped properly to know how things work. One thing that's happened recently for me is I realized that when I played on my Rose Racing game, I didn't actually know all the abilities that one of the NPCs I was using had. And that not knowing them actually made him kind of weak and made the combat a little bit less strong. I think there could have been more fun if I would have more fully known what that character could have done, what my NPCs could have done. Now, but at the same time, yes, there are definitely elements of which players, generally speaking, like not just the GMs, players too, not knowing their abilities. How many times do we joke on the internet, not just in Savage Worlds communities, but also in any other community, that people don't know how to use their features, don't know how their class works, they don't know how their powers or the spells work, don't know how different features work, or even just not knowing what skill they need to be using to accomplish a certain task. And so there's a lot of situations like that, or they get distracted in between turns. They're not staying engaged with what's happening in the combat. So how do we fix that? Well, we just encourage our players, right? We encourage, and we try to be better ourselves. We try to be more engaged and try to find more ways to be engaged. I think that one of the reasons that players often become slow is because they become less engaged in the game. And so we have to look for those signs of players not being engaged for whatever reason. What's causing them not to have fun? The more fun they're having, the more engaged they're going to be. The more engaged they're going to be, the more likely they're going to actually be able to know what their characters are supposed to be doing next. And I encourage the narrative aspect of things too. One of the quotes from the Reddit page, Reddit thread I started, I think really hit exactly what the problem is with the players. I'm going to kind of pull it up here. As with most TTRPGs, players are the slow thing in Savage Worlds. They take forever to make up their minds. They forget what dice to roll for the thing they do 90 times a session. They have to count on their fingers to add. They have to look up edges, powers every single time they want to use them. They can't remember if 7 is higher than 6. They don't pay attention to descriptions, etc., etc. Most everything else is normal or fast. Talking about Savage Worlds, the one-time speed is sacrificed, as acing dice. The results are more engaging, fun, and makes every roll meaningful because it is always a threat. Furious. Now, this was the most highly upvoted comment on that thread. And there's a lot of good comments out there. I encourage you to go check out the Reddit if you are on there to take a look at all the different things on the Reddit, all the different comments I saw on that thread. One of the things that someone else did bring up is that a lot of people brought this up actually, is that because they use a virtual tabletop, a lot of the things that we talked about being slow actually become very quick because things are macroed into the system, into the game when you use a virtual tabletop. So look at that as well. All right, I'm going to take a quick moment to look through the chat here. It's hard to kind of talk to you guys and stay at the chat at the same time. Looking through, Hamster Doom says, without players, the games move really quickly. Yeah, I imagine they do. Although I have played a game by myself a few times in a few solo plays. And when I've done that, I've noticed it actually is pretty slow. Not just combat, just the game generally, because I am not sure where I'm taking the game at this point. Christopher Levy says, I'd say individual combats can be slower than 5e at times. The overall usage of dramatic tasks, quick encounters, and social challenges, player engagement is higher and it feels quicker. And I think that is an element which we need to acknowledge, is that it's about what feels quicker. And because even whether or not it is quicker, it's actually not relevant to an extent. What is actually timed quicker is not super relevant. Now, I will say that one other comment I saw said that in Savage Worlds, for them and their experience, Savage Worlds combat takes 2 to 3 rounds, and that's about what I've seen as well in my games, like 3 rounds. And if we go to a 4th round, that's pretty incredible. You know, we can keep things quickly moving, especially if all the both the enemies and characters are engaged in combat from round 1. But in the end, sorry, I keep my microphone here. In the end, it doesn't really matter. It's what feels quicker, even if it's not actually quicker. And I think part of what makes things feel quicker is getting that engagement. So what can you do? One, my recommendation is emphasize narrative to keep that engagement up, to get players feeling and imagining the game, imagining the combat, and that should help ensure that things keep rolling through. Now, how you do that is going to be up to you and your game. Some people really feel like they need that tabletop like experience with the nice maps and stuff to feel really engaged. Some people feel more engaged when they just use theater of the mind and they're just imagining everything. Personally, I find that kind of bogs down things because my players tend to be very analytical about, you know, where they are and maybe more thinking mechanical senses. But nevertheless, figure out what makes your players engaged and figure out what works best for them. I'm running a game in 2 weeks with some players that I know are going to be way more imaginative and creative and more heavy role playing and less mechanically driven, and are going to really enjoy kind of that more imaginative mindset, using your imagination, theater of the mind, than using like a physical board. Now, personally, I'll probably use a physical board because there's an element of the game mechanics that I do enjoy. So I'll probably use a board for a little bit of it, but maybe not everything. But what else? Utilize tools. We talked about the chart that you can get with all the wounds and calculations and stuff. There's other tools for also the other options you have. If you look at my video about 5 combat tips, which I'll link in the cards after the video's over. If you look at that video, there's 5 tips. 2 of those tips we're using certain guides to help you know what options you have available to you in combat within Savage Worlds. So take that look at that. That should help a little bit. And 3, just keep it going. Again, in that video, I mentioned that if a player is having a hard time figuring out what they want to do, just put them on hold. There's actually a level at which sometimes players who are put on hold actually have an advantage because they can interrupt other people's turns and they can still take their turn whenever they want during the round. And even if it goes over into the next round, give them an option not to. Give them a chance at the end of the round to take their turn if they want to, so they don't lose a turn. But even if they decide to wait, they can go whenever they want. So just keep the game going. Can I keep things moving? If things can get bogged down, players are trying to do a lot of analyzing on their turn. Just be okay, we're going to move on to the next person in the line. Let me know when you're ready to do your turn, right? Just keep things going, and it helps by keeping things going, it helps keep things engaged. All right, so in the end, in my opinion, slowness is subjective. While I don't think that Savage Worlds is actually slower than other systems or think overall slow, I can understand that some systems are actually really quick, right? And some systems are a lot slower. And so maybe it's somewhere in the middle. But overall, in reality, I think what's more important is that your players feel engaged so that combat feels quick. So that when it comes time to the end of the session, players are going, what? We're done already? Right? That's the kind of experience you want to do. So share your experiences in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about Savage Worlds combat, if you think it's slow, what things you've done to make it faster, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts. Again, I'm going to go ahead into the chat and see what we're going on here. Vorpal Edge Productions says, for years running the game, it was always fast, but that was the same group. When I started a new group, I encountered something I wasn't used to. Players who could do math in their head. That's good. Yeah. Probably players who could do math in their head. Moving back over here, Vorpal Edge. That slowed things to a crawl to the point that other players pull out their phones to have entire conversations while they wait. I'm trying to figure out if you meant could or could not do. You could not. Okay, yeah. Could not do math in the head. It's like, oh, I was like, players who do the math in the head should make things a lot faster. My apologies, Vorpal Edge. Bengal said, I would say that Savage Worlds has more chances for player failure compared to something like 5e where it comes to combat. 5e is roll a hit. Successful always deals at least some damage. Yeah. And then that's the thing that's like, there's a chance of failure on that toughness front, right? Where there's an opportunity for failure because even though after a success, like you succeed and then you might not do anything. Now, I like that about Savage Worlds, but in the end, it does feel like failure, and that can cause some problems. So, yeah. I can understand that. Makes sense. Savage Worlds roll a hit, then roll to wound versus toughness, and then the enemy has chances to, yeah. There's a lot more options and to kind of like do certain things, and it kind of to slow the game down in that way. Christopher Leby says, so you can keep players engaged. I randomly attack the most disengaged player with minions, usually. That's not a terrible idea. I actually like that a lot. Yeah, no, I like that idea a lot. Unfortunately, I feel like my players tend to like just always have some sort of AoE that just like kills like 5 carrot things at once, and I've learned to start spreading out my minions a little bit further, but it also means they have less opportunity to like kind of gang up on people afterwards. So I need to use more tactics so I can make sure that I have someone available to go do that. So perfect. Bringing back up here. So Lunatic Design says that the race calculator bookmark is essential. Yeah, I have that bookmark, but I have printed another sheet out so I can like write player names on it to help me like quickly find the player I'm doing and getting that to more quickly ensure that I can like hit my players or know like how badly I've hit my players and such. So I can get those wounds out more quickly instead of like doing more math. He also says that if you use a side table for cards and conditions, it's very fast. Yeah, I've been playing with that idea a lot of trying to figure out like some sort of table that where I can put all the cards under like name markers or something, so I know like who's what, and then also putting like different stats effects right on them using the cards that you get with the Savage Worlds box. So I've been playing around with some things like that to make things a little bit quicker or a little more clear on what's happening. But a nice little side table would be nice. Although the only problem with that is kind of like knowing, having the space essentially for a side table. One thing I'm realizing as I'm saying this though, what I've seen like in the past before, like for D&D, for example, is having those little cards that you put over the top of the GM screen. Now, personally, I don't use a GM screen. I like to display my GM screen flat because it has all the information on it, which is helpful. But I like to have my roles open, be able to see the table, feel more open to the players and more engaged as part of the table. But what you could do is get like a little stand for cards. And the problem with cards also, they're facing one direction. So if I put them down in front of me, I won't not be able to see them, but they could. I could see a helpful tool that someone could design where it's the same card face front and back, so that as you you still shuffle and everything as always, that you could then deal them right into the card holder, and then you can both you and the players can see the card. They're seeing the one side, and the other person seeing their side. That'd be a good product. Reckless Fable says failures and piles of Benny rerolls prolonged combat. I think now there's an element which rerolling I think is still can be slowing down things, but it can also create that excitement of like, come on, like almost like the excitement of gambling, right? I mean, the idea is that these are poker chips in the most part. You're trying to spend these to try to gambling your chances of maybe succeeding on an important roll, and that can add to that furious nature, even if it doesn't add to the fast nature. I realize I have this mic all the way up here, and usually I have like way down here. So hopefully you guys aren't having your eardrums blown out. All right. Well, I think that's all I had to say tonight. I appreciate all of you joining me tonight to kind of talk about this not necessarily problem, but this topic that I've seen coming around in the Reddit quite often. People complaining about things being slow. And I will also add that my poll that I did to 116 votes, which is quite a few votes for a channel my size. Not a single person said that they thought that Savage Worlds combat was slower than 5e. Most of you said it's a lot faster. Some said it's a little faster. And then even less of you said it's about the same. But no one said it was slower. So thanks for if you voted in that poll. I appreciate it. I think we can. I feel comfortable saying that it's not slower than D&D, and if anything, it's faster, based on everything we said tonight. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you all, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Check out those Kickstarters, check out the newsletter, check out the links down below, and I will talk to you all next week. Also, I need some ideas for topics next week, so put those in the comments too. Night.